Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I welcome everyone to this important webinar. I believe it's coming on the back when the third nationally determined contribution has just been submitted. And of course, the National Development Plan for 2026 to 2030 is in the process of being developed. And obviously, we all know that climate conversation has transcended beyond an environmental concern to becoming an economic imperative. So our task is to ensure that every development plan and investment is aligned with the nation's climate ambition. So today's focus, we seek to have a clear and actionable blueprint on institutional coordination, fiscal strategy, private sector financing that we operationalize climate economy Nexus. I'm happy to be your moderator for this event. My name is Olumide Onitekon from the Africa Policy Research Institute. I'm the Policy and Research Officer for the Nigerian office. And I would also like to introduce our esteemed panelists who will be joining and bringing insightful perspective on this discourse. Just to also remind us that the purpose of this webinar is to seek on how to align the submitted nationally determined contribution, that's the third iteration, and the upcoming national development plan, so that the climate ambition also provide developmental goals for the nation. I'll introduce the speakers and of course the panelists. To start with is David Omata. David Omata is a fellow with Climate Protection Fellowship, Alexander von Humboldt, who is actually coordinating and leading on this webinar. We also have on this call, who has joined us this afternoon, Obi Kohanwa, apologies if I didn't pronounce the name well, Udochi Lois, who is the Assistant Director of State and Local Government Coordination, Programs and Projects with the Department of Plans and Projects, Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, who will be providing perspective, from the Ministry on the developmental priorities. And we also have on the call, Somkele Awakalu, who is a member of the Nigerian Transition Office, driving renewable energy finance and policy. So former economic advisor and key in the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan and Poverty Report. So he will be bringing perspective from the private sector. And we also have, I'm not sure she's on the call now, Shiomaide, the National Desk Officer for the NDC and MRV at the National Council on Climate Change. So those will be the speaker for today's webinar. And the webinar is straight and direct. We're going to be having the opening remark, and that fits into a presentation. And of course, the key panel discussion. Without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague, Omata David, to give us the opening remark. David, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. And thank you, Olumide. Thank you for everyone that has joined this discussion today. My name is Omata David Omakuji, and I am an Alexander von Humboldt Climate Protection Fellowship, currently hosted at the Africa Policy Research Institute in Berlin. So today, we are looking at aligning our NDC 3.0 with the National Development Plan. So we are looking into the mandates, the synergies, and the trade-offs. Please confirm if you can see my screen. Hello, Olumide.
We can.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So, all right, let me proceed. So as we know, we are currently at a very defining moment for Nigeria. We have two national blueprints. We have the energy transition plan is there. And aside this, we have the NDC 3.0, and Nigeria is privileged to be among the first countries, African countries, that have submitted their NDC 3.0. And like Olumide said, we have the National Development Plan that we are currently drafting for 2026 to 2030. So we call that the Renew Hope Agenda. Our goal today is to move beyond simply just talking to see how we can align these blueprints together. So how do we fuse these plans into a single operational strategy? And to do that, we must understand the core mandates, the specific targets, and most importantly, we need to know the synergies and the trade-offs that the key institutions that are going to execute this have already. And our three panelists that we have, from the climate regulation to the economic planning and the energy transition, at the end of my presentation, they will help us to map this out. So here we are, two blueprints and one national goal. NDC 3.0, which is submitted, the Economic Development Plan, which is currently called the Renewed Hope Development Plan, is being developed. The NDC 3.0 is our climate blueprint, and it has a primary target to cut emissions and to build resilience. On the other hand, our National Development Plan, which is developed by the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, is our economic blueprint, and it has a primary goal to build and grow our GDP, to create jobs, and to reduce poverty. But if you have followed the trends historically, you will see that economic growth and climate actions, they usually do not go hand in hand. If you need a rapid and economic growth, then you are going to have more energies and you are going to have more emissions. This is where energy transition comes in. And today, our task is to see how we can break this old model. So how do we ensure that the NDC 3.0 and the economic blueprint go hand in hand to build a sustainable and a resilient economy using the driver, which is the energy transition? So just to talk briefly on the mandates again, the National Council on Climate Change has a major mandate to mainstream climate action and implement the Nigerian climate policies. So we can say this is the chief regulator and the enforcer. Then plan, we have the long-term plan and we have the medium-term plan. The long-term plan is our target for Nigeria. That is the Vision 2060, where we want to achieve our net zero. And we currently have the medium-term plan. This is our NDC that has just been submitted. These plans translates into targets. We have a target that between now and 2030, Nigeria should cut down its emission by 29%. And then by 2035, we should cut down our emissions by 32%. So this means the job is to put a hard ceiling on our emission. And this can be done, let's say, through tools like our carbon budgets or emission trading scheme. Next, we have the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. So this ministry is the architect of the nation, and it has the mandate to formulate the National Development Plan that we are discussing, to set the national priorities, and to allocate the budget that we would use to achieve this. Also, there is a plan. We have the long-term plan. Currently, we have the Agenda 2050 for Nigeria, and we have the medium-term plan, which is the National Development Plan that we are discussing. And this also has its own target. So the NCCPRS that designs the nationally determined contribution has mandates and targets. The ministry that designs our National Development Plan has mandates and targets also. And this is to grow our economy by $1 trillion GDP by 2030. It also has a mandate to create jobs. So the previous National Development Plan had the target to create 21 million jobs. So this we are developing. We are hoping to see how many jobs that it's going to create for Nigeria. Then it also has a target to cut down or remove poverty. So how are we going to do poverty reduction? The previous plan targeted 35 million people out of poverty. So the plan that we are developing currently, what is the target, and how do we ensure that this target also aligns with our climate goals? Then next, we have the energy driver, that is the SC for all, and the energy transition office, where one of our panelists will also be doing justice to this. Now, the mandate is on two folds. First, to achieve SDG 7, which for Nigeria means bringing modern access and affordable energy to the 90 million Nigerians currently, or about 90 million Nigerians who do not have access to electricity. And this target is to be achieved by 2030. And the second is to implement the energy transition plan, which is our detailed roadmap. So the ETP has these main targets that at times we see them like, oh, they are very ambitious. Beyond the universal access, it aims to create 340,000 jobs by 2030 and about 804,000 jobs by 2060. But the biggest target for the energy transition in Nigeria, I would say, is the financial, because we require a $10 billion additional investment, which by 2060 will be 410 billion above the business as usual in Nigeria for us to achieve this. And remember, no country has ever grown without a reliable and affordable access to energy. So we have the Nigerian Energy Transition Office currently coordinating this, aiming to reduce our emission through renewable energy and drive our economy through the access to electricity. Now, let's briefly look at the nexus between this. So if we look at the win-win, how can we say there is a synergy between these three organizations: the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, the National Council on Climate Change, and the SC for all, the Nigerian Energy Transition Office? So if we look at the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning and the NCCPRS, so you see, like, the climate resilient infrastructure that we are hoping to build, it will protect the GDP and attract investment. On the other hand, the synergies between the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning and the SC for all. So if you look at the 340,000 jobs that the Nigerian Energy Transition Office is trying to provide through the energy transition plan between now and 2030, it also supports the creation of jobs that is mandated in the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. That is the target for our National Development Plan. And if you see the NCCC and the NSC for all, Nigerian Energy Transition Office, so the ETP's $10 billion annual investment that we are trying to pull in, you will see that it's a driver to fund our climate action. But if we move beyond these synergies that we have discussed to the trade-offs, this is the hard question, and this is what I believe that our panelists will answer for us. First, the growth versus the carbon budget. So how does the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning fuel a $1 trillion economy? This will require a massive amount of cement, steel, transport, and definitely this will require emission. So if you look at the mandate with the NCCPRS that is required to cut down our emissions by 29% in 2030, you will see that in a way there is a direct conflict. Secondly, if we talk about the speed of access and the purity of the source, so the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan promises us, we have the 30 gigawatt of electricity with 30% from renewable energy by 2030. So the fastest and the cheapest way, as we have known, to get a reliable power, to get these 90 million people in Nigeria that do not have access to electricity, to get them to have excess electricity, this would or might involve Nigeria to go to our decade of gas initiative using gas as a transition fuel. Now, if you look at this, does the NCCC's strict 2030 carbon budget allows for this, or does it force a renewable only path that might slow and we would miss the 2030 target of our emissions cut? Then we have the SC for all and the NCCC. Again, like I have tried to explain this, if we look at the trade-offs that exist between this, like I said, speed of access and then the purity of the source. So all of this put together, it means we need to have like a unified like a monitoring system where we would be able to see how the actions of one ministry or one agency it's affecting the actions of another agency. And we'll have everything go hand in hand, where we'll have a green economy, a win-win to have an economic growth, meeting our target, and also having access to electricity for all. So as I round up, what is that forward? This brings us to our panel. So these trade-offs are not impossible to solve if we look at, but they require a level of integration that maybe we have never attempted before. So the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning have to see climate goals as not a burden, but as a core metric for economic quality. The National Council on Climate Change must also see its role, not just as a regulator or cutting down emissions, but as an enabler for green investment. And the Nigerian Energy Transition Office must be able to be the vehicle that would service the both of these targets from the NCCC and the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. So this leaves me with these questions. First, how do we get a unified KPI that the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, the GDP target, and the NCCC's CO2 emissions are on the same dashboard? How do we design a single MRV system that tracks both the development and the climate action so that we know that, okay, we are having a sustainable development? And lastly, how do we use the national budget to de-risk private investment for green projects? I would end it here and I will leave it for the panel to discuss further. So if you need these slides or you have further questions, you can please do well to reach me with this contact. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, David, for that very insightful presentation. You literally hit, the nail on its head without, merry-go-rounding around the issues. Thank you for highlighting the issues. And one of the key things that you said for me that I'm holding on to is that when the National Council on Climate Change pushes for climate resilient infrastructure, it is literally protecting the 1 trillion GDP economy that our developmental agenda is trying to build. So I see this as a win-win situation, both in achieving our climate ambition and meeting our developmental goal. Well, without taking much of a time, I think I will just yield to Charles. Charles Asiegbu is going to be the moderator for this panel session, and I'm looking forward to hearing the insights that will be coming up from the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning on how they are seeing climate, if truly climate, they are considering climate as an economic imperative, and also looking forward to hearing from Som Kele, giving perspective from private sector, because one of the key things that we need to leverage from private sector is the finance and the technical expertise that they bring to the table to ensure an harmonized and coordinated effort towards ensuring a climate and economy nexus. Charles, I believe you're ready, as I am, and I'm super excited to hear from our panelists. I will just hand over to Charles, who will take us further for the panel discussion. Charles, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Olumide, and thank you so much, David, for doing justice to that presentation. We are just going to go straight into the conversation. Good day, everyone, and welcome once again to this webinar titled Operationalizing Nigeria's Climate Economy Nexus, Aligning NDC 3.0 with the NDP 2026 to 2030. I'd like to start by saying that this conversation is timely, given the current conversations with the new NDC and the NDP that's being drafted. We stand at a defining moment, one where climate ambition must be hardwired into economic planning and not just treated as an afterthought. So today's dialogue is about moving from vision really to execution. And we have an excellent panel that will help us respond to questions that David has raised and questions that may come up from participants, and then chat practical next steps for coordination for both federal and state actors and public and private sector institutions. We have, just for those who are not here in the beginning, we have three very important personalities. We have Chioma Ede. I don't know if she's on the call now, but we have Chioma Ede Felicitas, who is the National Desk Officer for NDC at the National Council on Climate Change. We have Somkele Awakalo, who is a member of the Nigerian Energy Transition Office. We have Obi Kauno Udochi Lois, who is the Assistant Director, State and Local Government Programs and Project Coordinations, Plan and Projects Department of the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning. We are just going to take an intro question where everyone will respond to. We have about 45 minutes on this session. The question is, I'll first direct it to Somkele, and then Mr. Luis can go ahead to also respond. So now that the NDC is published and the NDP is being drafted, what single most critical or urgent institutional or policy mechanism must Nigeria establish to ensure that climate goals are fully measurable and integrated into our core economic sectorial planning? Somkele, if you got that question, do you want to go ahead to respond?
Thank you, Charles. And first of all, thank you to David for that important intro, which provides a necessary segue into this conversation. That question is quite a voluminous question, so I'll try to break it down. I was part of the National Development Plan process, the previous one, the 2021 to 2025. So I understand how important it is for there to be coherence amongst multiple partners. And the good work that the Federal Ministry of Budget and National Planning do is that they have a bunch of very senior economists and senior people who understand the economy that do some kind of financial modeling that enables them get to the point where they know the critical levers that need to move. I think that the first thing that, okay, you said one critical point, I think, is that coherence. I think there need to be people in the room within this, let's call it macroeconomic working group, or the NDP development core working group that understand what the requirements are on the climate side. I think when we speak about climate, we speak about it as sort of an addendum, but there are economies right now that are growing on the back of green energy or on the back of renewable energy technology. And the thing about it now is that the unit economics is starting to make sense. So the cost curves of some of these technologies, these new age technologies, is going down while the yield curve is trending upwards. So I think the one thing that I want to really flag is having that coherence. So the people who are in the room need to also look at the NDCs and understand that between 2026 and 2035, there's already $337 million required for mitigation and adaptation. That needs to be figured out somewhere. But again, the government, whether it's at the federal, the state, or the local government, their role going forward should sort of be an enabler. It's not dependent on the government. We should be able to use $1 or £1 of public sector funding to catalyze about 10x of private sector participation. So I think that it's ultimately important that we have policy coherence and there are people in the room that actually understand green growth and understand the fiscal requirements that we need over time. So I'll stop there. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that intervention. Mr. Luis, do you want to go ahead to respond to the question? Okay, I don't think he's on this call. So I'll just go to the next question, Somkele. Um, so given your work at the Nigerian Energy Transition Office, one key conversation has been around financing. Financing, the just energy transition has remained the major hurdle. From your experience, what specific blended finance mechanisms has proven most effective from your experience?
Thank you. I think it was breaking up for me, but I got the gist of it. Or I think it's my internet that is unstable. Please let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So in my experience over the last 4 years or so of working in the Energy Transition Office, I understand the importance of having an innovative approach to this age-old problem, because what is going on is that there is a shrinking fiscal space, but they're increasing priorities. So you have to make sure that you can balance scarce resources with numerous wants. And what that has shown, I wanted to just not quite make a correction, but make an addition to what David has said. So I know we've been quoting the energy transition plan, but there have been some changes since that. You had mentioned that it's 410 billion above business as usual. That was as at 2022. Right now, it's 500 billion. So as time is going, the scale of the problem is also growing. So what is going on right now is that the policymakers are also aware. In fact, Nigeria is part of this bigger initiative under the World Bank and Africa Development Bank called the Mission 300 Initiative. And what that aims to do, it aims to have the number of unelectrified people in Africa by 300 million. Right now, it stands as around 600 million, of which 86 million or 90 million, depending on where you read your data from, are in Nigeria. Financing this is a massive challenge, because if you use a rule of thumb of 1 megawatt generation costs about $1 million, and we're talking about 30 gigawatts that we need by 2030, just do the math. So a gigawatt times how much it takes to do a megawatt, you understand the scale of the challenge that we're dealing with. But what the government has been so clever to do is that it's provided incentives. So not just fiscal incentives, but incentives in terms of, if you think about, there's a World Bank program going on right now called the Distributed Access Through Renewable Energy Scale-Up. It's a $750 million subsidy program that is meant to encourage the private sector to come into the energy access space. That $750 million was borrowed by the government from the World Bank, obviously at concessional rates and without having any impact, too much impact on our debt sustainability. But what that $750 million is going to do is probably going to catalyze 5x, 10x, because what the subsidy is doing is that it's providing a financial viability, it's closing the viability gap for investors to come in. So the one thing that I think is going to really get us to where we need to get to by 2030, by 2050, by 2060 is encouraging private sector participation. And encouraging private sector participation means that there has to be clarity around policy. If we're looking at the National Development Plan 2026 to 2030, and this we're saying is our framework for development over the 4 years, let that be sacrosanct. And at the same time, it needs to incorporate some of the information that is already on the NDCs, which is an internationally acclaimed document. We have submitted this to the UNFCCC. So I think it's so important. I think I go back to my first point around policy coherence, but I think it's also important that the government, which they are doing already, recognize the importance of the private sector. So in terms of instruments, it has to be using some blended financing. You need to be able to pull in public sector capital and then blend that with philanthropic capital that is much cheaper. So when you put that in the capital stack, it begins to make sense for investments. We're seeing that in big funds like Project Zafiri that the IFC is bringing on stream. We're seeing that in the Nigeria DRE fund, which the NSI, Africa 50 and SE for All are championing. And we're seeing that that's a system that is very replicable, because a lot of the philanthropic capital out there is looking for impact, and you're getting a lot of impact from energy access and from renewable energy programs. So I think I'll stick to my point on policy coherence, ensuring that all the major policymakers are working in tandem and not in silos, and making sure that we're working together in one piece. And also we need to continue to leverage blended finance instruments. I know there's talk of guarantees, and a lot of that is putting strain on the public sector. But if you think about it and you look at the private sector, I think blended financing is the way to go, and having a policy direction that is unwavering. Because one of the things that investors don't like is when there's a U-turn made in policy and they've already deployed a certain amount of capital. So I'll stop there because I see Mr. Lewis is back, so I don't hog the conversation.
Thank you very much. I was going to throw you another question, but we'll wait for Mr. I don't know. I can't see him on this call. Can we confirm? Okay, he's back on. Yeah. Welcome back, Mr. Lewis. We are already going further in the conversation, and we just have a few questions for you. So, given the role of the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning in driving economic growth in Nigeria, what fiscal or budgetary frameworks will ensure that state projects support and report on NDC targets? That is, if there is even any effort from the part of both the government at the national and some national level to integrate and mainstream NDC targets.
No. Yeah, thank you, the moderator. Sorry, the network has not been stable. Just went off. Happy I'm back. Also thank the moderator did the introduction for recognizing the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning as the architect of the nation. So, however, the ongoing plan, the NDP 2021 to 2025, as we all know, will be ending by December. So, like the previous speakers has pointed out, we have started the process of drafting the successor plan called the NDP 2026 to 2030. So the ministry has commenced with sensitization and consultation working meetings with federal NDS to sensitize them on the successor plan that the present plan is phasing out by December. And also the ministry has also categorized the Nigerian economy into 37 thematic areas, which in turn will form the technical working groups, which the climate change is well represented because it happens to fall into two technical working groups. The first being the environment, climate, ecological development and disaster management technical working group, as well as the cross-cutting issues technical working group. As we all know, climate change is a cross-cutting issue. So they have the privilege of being in two technical working groups. So the onus is on Ministry of Environment, the NCCPRS, to ensure that they play their prominent role in these technical working groups, because that's where most of the things we are postulating in this discussion will be captured and will reflect the successor plan. So going to your question, the specific things, budgetary frameworks and fiscal structures that will be designed into the plan to help the plan to capture the national NDC targets. I would say that the new plan is having a new structure because the ministry led by the able minister we have is coming up with a bottom-up approach where we will start from the ward level, the grassroots, then up. It has never happened before. It's a new invention into this successor plan, and the committee led by professors from Lagos Business School, NISA, and our capable directors and members of this committee, they have even come up with a questionnaire that will be administered at the ward level, where councillors, community leaders will answer questions in that questionnaire, and the data derived from this questionnaire will form the basis of the new plan. So with this, you can see that if we start from the grassroots, your question will be addressed in the plan because the states, the local governments, and even the ward level will be full participants in the development of the plan, and as a result, they will be free to contribute. And by so doing, the plan will be holistic, and NDC, national NDC targets will be captured, will be effectively carried out. Another strategy, again, a budgetary strategy that can also be designed into the plan to ensure that it's holistic and that the NDC targets are captured, includes green budgeting. If you in green budgeting, you incorporate budgeting and budgeting principles into the plan to prioritize climate resilient and low carbon investments. If you look at the Climate Change Act 2021, the part 5 of it, it gave timelines as well as responsibilities to both Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning and the National Council of Climate Change, as well as the Federal Ministry of Environment, the role they should play green budgeting. I would say, I don't know whether they following that directly, but they at part 5 clearly stated those timelines that will take effect immediately the act was signed into law. So it's left for NCC and the NCCPRS and the Ministry of Environment to know whether they are collaborating with the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning to ensure that green budgeting in Nigeria is achieved. Because if they follow what the act says, the strategy we are talking about will be achieved. Also, if we involve result-based budgeting, when I say result-based, I mean aligning budget allocations with specific outcomes and outputs that contribute to NDC targets. In this case, the plan should be specific on NDC 3.0 programs and projects to enable the subnationals, in this case, the states, local government, and even the wards, align their budget, align their own state plans, and also develop their own budget lines. So if we incorporate result-based budgeting process into this new plan, I think the states and local government will be very, very carried along, and the issue of mainstreaming, we always talk about mainstreaming will in fact be achieved. Also, if we adopt performance-based budgeting, performance-based funding, where we allocate funds to subnationals based on their performance in achieving NDC-related targets. This will encourage healthy competition among states in achieving their NDC targets. This can come in form of conditional grants to subnational governments for specific projects in the national NDC target. So if we can also involve this strategy in our new plan, I think it will help. Also, establishing a climate finance framework to mobilize and allocate climate finance resources to support national NDC target implementation. This should be here I would suggest that there should be a basket of climate finance fund, which should be domiciled at the appropriate agency that has the capacity and mandate to coordinate, like the Federal Ministry of Finance, because they have the Federal Ministry of Budget, because they have the coordination role to play. So what I mean here is that current situation where climate finance cannot be traced to any basket, but rather scattered. Presently, if you ask NCC, that's NCCPRS, or even Ministry of Finance, how much are coming to the country, from the promises made at the various COPs, you see that nobody can give a fixed figure, because our climate finance is scattered. So if we have this kind of framework, that we have a basket where all funds on climate change will be domiciled, I think it will also help. The budgetary strategy we can also apply.
Thank you, sir.
So,
I have a follow-up question, but I just wanted to let our viewers know that, and our participants know that they can drop questions, so that towards the end of this conversation, they are able to also intervene. Questions and a bit of comments will be accepted, so you can drop it in the comments. I just have a follow-up question for you, sir.
okay.
You spoke about NCCC, and we all know that NCCC and some other organizations are piloting the climate action, and it is probably their sole role to ensure that we achieve the NDC, for example, or achieve the targets. But I just want to know how the ministry, you spoke about technical committees, and it is expected that NCCPRS is also part of it.
Yeah.
At the ministry level, how is your relationship with the NCCPRS, and how are you coordinating to ensure the active participation, to ensure that there's that fusion between climate readiness or climate action and then economic growth?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, the technical working group remains the best way, because they have a chairman, co-chair. Even the private sector are involved in this technical working group, and it has been constituted, though not yet inaugurated. So very soon it will be inaugurated, and I'm very sure the NCCPRS, as well as the Ministry of Environment, will be well represented. So it is at this level that we come up with everything climate, and then that will form the basis of the plan. So I use this opportunity to join the NCCPRS to ensure they are very active in that technical working group.
Thank you very much, sir. Kelly, I just have another question for you. You spoke about, so it's two-phased, there are two buckets. So you spoke about how we need a coherence, or there's a need for coherence in our policy design to ensure that we attract the kind of finance or private capital support to boost renewable efforts. So are there like specific policies, or do you think there are existing policies that we need to relook to ensure that there's that form of coherence? And then the second is, Can you also speak a bit about how energy transition can ensure, you spoke about jobs. I want to get more insight on how we can increase the number of jobs and also inclusion for vulnerable groups.
Okay, thanks for those questions. I want to build up on the point that Mr. Lewis have made in terms of those technical working groups. So when you're doing the national development plans, there are multiple technical working groups that focus on the different sectoral areas or the different important groups. There'll be like a macroeconomic group. There'll probably be a green growth group. I don't know how it's constituted now. And in having the right people in the room, the right professors from Lagos Business School, the right people from the National Council of Climate Change, you're already harmonizing the policy environment. So that work is already being done at that level. I don't think that there's a dearth of policy actions in Nigeria, a dearth of reforms in Nigeria. I think it's just about implementing those plans. So every few times we know we need to do a national development plan, every time we know we need to do nationally determined contributions. There was the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. There's already a timeline for those things. How do we make sure that going forward, when there's an NDC 4.0 or there's the NDP 2031 to 2035, we make sure that there's more significant alignment. So I think it's not about coming up with new policies or pinpointing exact policies that need to be strengthened. I just think that all the major players need to be talking to themselves. And one other major point that Mr. Lewis hit is about understanding where this bucket of financing is going. So we have a lot of interactions with international institutions, with bilateral treaties with governments. The Ministry of Finance right now has taken ownership of that. Prior to this, maybe 5-10 years ago, the Ministry of Environment was at the forefront, or perhaps the Ministry of Energy. But we understand that this transition to green growth is really from a financial perspective. If we can keep a lid on all the pockets of financing coming in, excuse me, if we can also think about things from fiscal incentives, so even down to certain companies being given import waivers, that's a fiscal incentive that's coming from the Minister of Finance. So I think that they're doing a lot of good work in that area. In fact, there's a green growth desk within the Ministry of Finance that is being developed to look at industrialization, so green industrialization, how we can diversify the economy and ensure a just transition, which is the perfect segue into your question. I think that a lot of African countries have been very focused on ensuring that the energy transition is just and equitable. And that is why there's a lot of clamor around the use of gas as a transition fuel. So a lot of our policymakers are from the school of thought that you can't come and say, give up what you need to industrialize and give up what is giving you your growth without having some kind of cushion to help you to weather that storm. So even if you look at the energy transition plan, which has now sort of been superseded by the National Integrated Resource Plan, as stated by the NDC. But if you look at it, there's an understanding that if we're going to stop venting and emissions from refineries, we need to make sure that those skilled workers are trained in the renewable energy aspect. So to be able to install the solar panels, to be able to clean that, to be able to do all the technical work that is done there. So in understanding the energy transition, we need to understand those that might be left behind. So this, in countries where there's co-domination, like in South Africa, in Mpumalanga community, there's a whole work that they are doing right now to transition those co-workers to more renewable energy. So I think it's also about having the foresight from the policymakers to understand that there are a lot of mechanics right now, but if we're transitioning to electric mobility within the next decade or next 15 years, we need to make sure that those mechanics are upskilled to be able to handle this e-buses. We're seeing a lot of proliferation of CNG buses now. A lot of e-buses are coming. Those people that have the technical expertise should not be left behind. And one of the most important things that we've done definitely at SE for All and the Energy Transition Office, and I also see policymakers doing, is actually engaging with the community. You can't sit down here and perhaps not be feeling as much of the impact of the climate actions and this just transition you're trying to impose without actually talking to the civil service societies or the CSOs, or talking to community leaders who are in these local trends to understand what does a just transition look like for you? How do we make sure that the communities that are most impacted by flooding, the most impacted by some of these natural disasters caused by climate issues are at the forefront? So that's sort of speaking to the soft side of the transition. I've also spoken about jobs, and we also need to be most thoughtful about gender impact. I think one of the things that we've not really touched on today is on clean cooking, which disproportionately affects women. People that are using traditional fuels like kerosene and firewood, that has a massive impact on health risks, maternal mortality, infant mortality, and there's a disparity between rural and urban growth. We need to be mindful of that. We need to be ensuring that we're doing a lot of work around making sure that these new technologies are affordable, they're available, and that people are actually made aware that there are alternatives. One of the things around clean cooking that I always mention is people speaking about, okay, the taste is going to be different if I don't use firewood for my jollof rice. And while that is a valid concern, perhaps the innovators around us, I see David laughing, maybe somebody can come up with a way by which we're using this solar cook stoves and it's still giving you the same output, because there's the ingenuity in Nigeria is you can't even fathom it. So I think that these are some of the points around making sure that we have a just and equitable transition. But make no mistake, the transition is going to occur. Whether we want to be part of it in Nigeria or not, is going to happen. In 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of the spare parts that you're looking for for your fossil fuel vehicles may not be available, because everybody has already moved forward with electric vehicles. If you go to China now, the proliferation of electric cars, electric buses, electric motorcycles is just already showing us that the trend is going one way. We just need to make sure that we are not left behind, but also holding the global north accountable that we need to transition in a just and equitable manner.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I like how the flow, how you even went into clean cooking and how it is impacting women. So if you recall, Mr. Lewis, talked about how, the minister is, adopting a bottom-up approach, which, is trying to close that gap to ensure that there's that form of community inclusion in climate action and even economic planning. From the private sector side of things, it'd be good to hear your thoughts around what you think the inclusion level is like. How can you assess it? Do you think really we are doing a lot? Like generally, I don't know what the stats are, but it would be good to hear what you think, and if there are also like innovative strategies that the ministry can take back to ensure that they are doing it efficiently and doing it for with results. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's always important to engage, even in fora like this, where we're 4, 5 speakers and we're bringing all our different perspectives to bear. There's some things within the presentation that David provided that sparked an idea in my mind. There are things Mr. Lewis has said that has also entrenched and supported some of the ideas I have. So I think that one of the things that the ministry has been doing well, whether it's the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Environment, is that they have been holding a lot of workshops. I think 2 months ago, there was a Mission 300 workshop that the Honorable Minister of Power hosted that sort of brought together different stakeholders within the power sector. Even the Minister of Science and Technology was there. So that engagement is extremely necessary. And even going to the grassroots, I think I can't emphasize how important it is to meet the leaders of the traditional communities, even at the local government level. Because if you look at it, for instance, you're a developer, you want to develop a mini grid. The most important thing is your agreement with that host community. So if you do not understand what their challenges are, and you come there and you say your tariff is going to be 500 naira per kilowatt hour, your project is dead on arrival. But in engaging with them and understanding why haven't you been able to pay your band D tariff, or what is the reason behind the grid not being able to extend here? Is it for cost reasons? Is it because you have displayed that you won't be able to pay in the past? So I think that bottom-up approach is extremely important. And perhaps you do the bottom-up approach and you do the top-down approach and somewhere meet in the middle. So from where I sit, I do a lot of these kind of engagements to learn, to share my own expertise around financing and around the general energy transition. So I think the engagement is really important. We need to strengthen that. And we also need to ensure that we continue to make our voices heard on the international level. I think our policymakers are doing that very well. Wherever there is a gathering of, whether it's at COP, the Conference of Parties, whether it's at the UN General Assembly, we should have representation there to bring our unique context to bear, because no two countries are going to have the exact same energy transition. There are some people who their economy is dominated by coal. We have a diesel-based economy, a diesel and petrol genset economy. That is really the thesis of our energy transition. So having that insight and understanding has to be from the grassroots level and be coming up. Because if you sit at the top, you may be far removed from some of the actual situations. You may be thinking that, oh yeah, when there's no power from the grid, everybody's on gensets. But actually, there's still some people that use kerosene-powered lanterns. There's still some people that use candles. And if you're not connected to the grassroots, you may not understand how that impacts. And then you may be developing policies that are not in tandem with your current realities. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. I think what I like about your comment was the need for constant engagement, not just engagement, switching from traditional mode of engagement for people at the bottom to non-traditional modes. Instead of perhaps maybe going to the community, having a town hall, there's a need to have them in conversations like this. I mean, there is a lot of conversation around how there's also that digital transformation gap, but ensure that they are included in rooms where ordinarily you will not find them, and that could spark ideas, that could energize them, provide them with the right tools to also engage and request actively. Thank you very much. So I'll be asking one more question from Mr. Lewis, and then we'll be taking it over to the audience. I think there are a couple of questions, one or two from participants. So Mr. Lewis, we've discussed extensively about finance, and Somkele mentioned that the Ministry of Finance is at the forefront, driving conversation around attracting private investment to finance climate projects. From your own ministry, of course, we know that there's a split. The Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning is on its own. Are there current engagements to, probably attract private sector to co-finance climate projects? Or are there, like, for example, do you have a desk, a green growth desk, something like that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Definitely, because when we talk of national development plan, it's inclusive, both the private sector, the civil society organization, as well as the different levels of government, the subnational. They're all, that's why it's called national development plan. So the onus, like I always say, is on different sectors to now utilize opportunity and speak for themselves. The ministry, in the last plan, there was, I think, for the first time, there's this DPIU, Development Plan Implementation Unit. You know, in the outgoing plan, it was successfully established and inaugurated. You know, and in that DPIU is made up of both the private sector representatives, the directors of planning at state level, as well as civil society organizations, CSOs, and then members of the PRS Department of Federal MDS. They're all members of that DPIU, Development Plan Implementation Unit. So they monitor, they track, they have tools like the IMAC tool. I don't know whether I've heard of that. So they track, citizens also on their own track and own up the process. So with the NDC 3.0 coming on board now, with the new plan coming on board, I encourage them to make a case so that they will also be members, the critical stakeholders, the members of this DPIU. So to give them an opportunity to track, monitor, and also contribute. And by so doing, climate change will effectively implemented and followed. So that body, that unit is very important. It's domiciled in the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Plan. So I will also suggest some climate lens, that we can adopt, that can also help in the implementation of NDC 3.0. For instance, if in our plan we can integrate climate change into planning framework, which is what we are doing now, because previous plan like the ERGP, there were some people that were saying that climate change was not fully captured, when the alignment was drawn. But I believe the present plan, like what we have started doing now, if we keep it up, climate change will be well captured and will be embedded into the planning framework. Also, if we can set climate goals, targets, set it smart goals and targets, then pursue them. I think also NDC 3.0 targets will be captured in the plan. So there are a lot of things. If we allocate resources based on climate priorities, I think it will help. So these are some climate lens that we can incorporate into the new plan. And like I said earlier on, this meeting is timely. This discussion is timely. It's an opportunity to embrace the new plan and capture everything necessary to make sure that our climate finance and NDC set targets are achieved.
Thank you very much. I see that you threw a lot of responsibilities to the NCCC. I wish they were able to join. I have one question here from the audience, and it's for you, Mr. Lewis. So it said 2026 is here already, and the NDP 2026 to 2030 seems to be at the initial stage of the development. What should the public expect from? Okay, when should the public expect that this plan will be published, given that we are already in 2026?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, the questionnaires design has already been designed, and we are looking forward to, I think the NEC, too, National Economic Council, in their last meeting approved the plan. Plan is not something you wake up and you have to get the buy-in of different planning bodies, like the Joint Planning Board and NCDC. So the meeting of Joint Planning Board will soon be constituted. So it is at that Joint Planning Board that memos from different stakeholders will be presented. So when those memos are read and they are approved, in fact, the plan is half done. So we are really on course. We are working towards ensuring that before the year runs out, the new plan will be developed so that as early as 2026, the plan will start running. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is for you, Somkele. It says, how can Nigeria's just transition strategically, how can Nigeria's just transition specifically address the historical injustices, such as the environmental degradation and job losses faced by the Niger Delta region?
That's a great question, and it ties very nicely into what I was saying earlier, that there are different contexts for this just energy transition. And looking at it, there's been a historical and evidence-based impact on the Niger Delta area. So in consideration of that, we need to engage with the community leaders to understand, perhaps be championing them to adopt this more resilient technologies, these cleaner technologies, and prioritize their incorporation into the plans for the jobs. So if we have decided that there's going to be 830,000 jobs, again, there are a lot of people in Niger Delta that are still working within the oil and gas sector, perhaps allocate a certain amount after sustained conversation with them. But I think also we need to make sure that it's not just about the Niger Delta. I think it's to ensure that the entire ethnic makeup of Nigeria is also a focus, because what is going to happen is that there is high level of solar irradiation in the north. There's going to be a lot of mini grids that are going to be put there. So there's going to be a lot of people there that will get jobs. That doesn't mean you neglect the southern part of Nigeria. We need to make sure that we're understanding that. So when you're thinking about the just transition, there are different types of justices, procedural justice, environmental justice. So if you look at the JETP in South Africa, they also have a context of racial undertones. So in crafting their own just energy transition, they have to take that into order. So that's some of the stuff that we need to do. And the only way we can really get an understanding is by having these conversations. Even on the gender side, historically, there's been marginalization for women in Nigeria. We need to make sure that as we're moving forward with our just and equitable transition, we make sure that women are hand in hand with what we're doing. So I think, again, it's always going to be an iterative process. It's going to be a living document and a living process that we're going to follow, because things can continue to change. You mentioned earlier an important part, which is the digital gap that exists between maybe rural and urban areas. We need to close that gap as part of the transition, because a lot of the things going on in the energy transition space require a knowledge of digital capacity, whether it's Web3, whether it's blockchain, whether it's crypto. We need to close that gap. That's part of just energy transition, and you wouldn't realize those things without having the right conversations between stakeholders. So I think to answer the point or the question that was asked, we definitely need to prioritize the involvement of the Niger Delta and the just energy transition, given the historical impact on that area. But we should not also neglect gender. We shouldn't neglect youth. We shouldn't neglect that knowledge gap that also exists.
Thank you so much. I have a follow-up question, but it is both for you and Mr. Lewis. So, in aligning both the NDC and the NDP, bringing them together to function better and help us achieve both goals. Which of the mandate do you think should be the primary driver? Is it the NDC or the NDP? It would be good to hear our thoughts, and it's from the audience, really.
Yeah, so let me go first, so that I can bite the bullet for Mr. Lewis. I think that the National Development Plan, if there's anything that's going to take priority, it's going to take priority because that's a 5-year plan and it's a national plan that has always occurred since the beginning of time. However, the NDCs are out already, and we've made certain statements to the international community about what we're trying to achieve, what our goals are. The NDP planning committee must take that into cognizance. And we can't be moving in alternate universes. We need to make sure that the technical working group that is focused on industrialization understands that our industrialization must be green. We need to start thinking about how we can decarbonize in the industry sector on the cement side of things while still ensuring that we can maintain this $1 trillion economy that David has spoken about. I think that we need to not think about climate as a sector on its own, but we need to look at it as an overarching driver of the economy. So for me, please don't quote me anywhere. I know we're recorded, but I think the NDP takes priority, but it must incorporate and must take cognizance of the NDCs.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I think you're already shaping the narrative, and I hope Mr. Lewis goes another way or takes the opposing view. Mr. Lewis, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Sonkele has answered it, and I will say I will concur with him that the development plan takes the lead, is the navigator for the country. So, but they can't do it alone. All the other sectorial plans need to, come together to align with it. That's why we always talk of mainstreaming. Anything you're doing, you must mainstream it into the National Development Plan. And mind you, National Development Plan has its own long vision. Like in Nigeria, we talk of Vision 2050, NG 2050. So that's where the plan, the 5-year, the midterm plan cues into. The vision 2050 is already there. So the plan, the NDP is only implementing what the vision has already said. So NDC should key into and make sure they align with that vision. So they all work hand in hand, both the sectorial plans, the national development plan, the master plan, even strategic plans at different MDAs. They all come together. And even policies, there are still climate change policies. They all come together and then become the country's priority and ensure that those things are achieved. So they all work together. But the development plan takes the lead because all must align with the development plan.
Thank you very much. I have one final question before we share our closing thoughts. So from the private sector side of things, how do you think that the government or the public sector can work better? What are the current gaps, and then what are the prospects? And then when you answer that, Mr. Lewis will answer from the public sector side of things.
Yeah, so I think the gap for the private sector has always been understanding the direction of the public sector. So the public sector is to play that enabling role, and the private sector comes in. If you look at within the oil and gas sector and the amount of money that Alhaji Aliko Dangote has sunk in to providing the refinery, there are many other private sector players that have been making investments. If you look at Transcorp in the power sector, if you look at Geregu Power, there are a lot of people that are ready to provide the financing in Nigeria as long as they can see a route to return. Obviously, this is not a charity. If you invest your money somewhere, you need to be able to know that you can get a decent amount of return coming from it. But that return can be affected by policy change. So if, for instance, you invest some money and that investment that you have provided, you got that capital in foreign exchange, and for a policy decision, it leads to a devaluation. The central bank decides to devalue the naira. Your whole investment can be gone in 1 second. But if there's constant policy direction, the private sector will feel a lot more comfortable in investing. Don't get me wrong, there are private sector people investing in Ukraine right now. There are private sector people investing in very unstable regions. But what you can see now in Nigeria is that there's been a stability in the macroeconomics. There've been favorable information that is coming out of the news, removal from gray list and whatnot and the other. That is a catalyst for private sector participation. And I very much believe in my engagements with the private sector, which is part of my responsibilities. I'm seeing a lot more keenness, even in terms of foreign direct investment. There are a lot of people that are saying, I like this stability, I like the policy direction we're going to come in. So I think the private sector is just waiting to capitalize on the impact that the public sector is already providing.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that contribution. Mr. Lewis, in like 2 minutes, can you also respond from the public sector side of things? What do you want to see differently? Are there current gaps, in the relationship between the private and public sector regarding economic growth and climate partnerships? And then what are the prospects? You're muted, sir.
Yeah, sure. I would say there is gap, but the gap is closing in because of new things being introduced by the present administration. The gap is closing in, but we are looking forward for more, partnership, because government can't do it. The public sector must come in, government partners must come in. Those collaboration always help every country. And like the last NSG that was done, you can see the role the private sector is playing. So it should be sustained. Such relationship will help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, sir. So we're going to be taking our final words. But before then, I'd like to rope in David a bit. David, do you want to chip in a few things before I turn it back to our panelists, just so that we'll cover a bit? Our third panelists did not participate, so yeah, I'm co-opting you.
All right, thank you, Charles. I think I don't have much to say. I think Mr. Lewis and Mr. Somkele has been able to cover up this gap. So even as we couldn't have the NCCPRS on board today, we have been able to see where we need to synergize more and how we need to deal with the potential conflicts that are there or that would come up in the future. So all the explanations, I think, have done much of the justice to this. And Mr. Lewis has assured us that we would have the NDP out before the end of the year. So, Mr. Lewis, I think we would quote you on that, and we hope to say that. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, like in less than 2 minutes, Somkele, just give us your parting words, the way forwards, and Mr. Lewis will go next. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. So I think we kicked off this conversation in the right manner. I think the presentation from David provided us with the necessary questions that we need to ask ourselves. And I think at the end of every discussion that we have, we need to be asking ourselves questions. So what? So in this conversation, I think what we need to be asking is, so what? How do we ensure that the NDP is an important reflection of what our growth trajectory should be, given the current realities? So while we try to diversify our economy, while we try to strengthen our oil and gas sector, keeping in mind that we have promises under the Paris Agreement that we have provided to the world, We have promised to be a low carbon, climate resilient development country. We have promised that we're going to get to net zero by 2060. All that should be incorporated in the national development plan. And kudos to the entire team for putting this together. I think it's so important that we continue to come together and keep the fire burning on the right direction for Nigeria to go in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Like I said, this discussion is timely, and I hope we keep it up. Like David said, he's quoting me, but I'm assuring him that there won't be a gap in our development planning process. The machineries has been set all in place. Like I said earlier, the NEC has approved that the development plan should be there. The joint planning board, the memos from different NDS are being collected. The technical working group has been constituted. It's just a matter of inaugurating them. So once all these mechanisms are in place, coming up with a plan will be as easy as. So I'm assuring you that there won't be gap. That's what I'm assuring. There won't be development planning gap as far as Nigeria is concerned. And like I said earlier on, is a midterm. There is a longer plan, that is the Nigeria Agenda 2050, which is running. So the plan is only key into it and ensuring that it's aligned with other strategies like SDG, AU Agenda 2063. So all those things, the NDP, ensures that they align together with the NDC 3.0. So we're on course, and the ministry is trying very, very well, especially with the innovative of starting from the bottom of the World Development Program, which has started. Take your word, you may see the questionnaires already being attended to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I think what I saw was Mr. Lewis was trying to edit his earlier commitment. He said he committed that the process is in place. And thank you very much, sir. We have come to the end of this session, and I must thank everyone for their very, very robust contribution. I myself, I'm going home with a lot of insights. Thank you very much. I'll now hand it over to Olumide to take us on the next segment. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so very much, Charles, for that excellent moderation. It's a really, really insightful conversation. I love the energy Somkele brought to the conversation, and I also love the perspective. I don't want to say political perspective that Lois brought, but it's a very, very insightful conversation. I think for me, the key takeaway for me for this session is one of the key things that Somkele mentioned, that one of the key things that we need to actualize, the alignment between our NDC and our NDP is policy coherence. And it didn't just stop there. It said policy coherence that evolve and adapt to current needs and reality. I think for me, that, is really a big win. And of course, one key thing that Lois also mentioned that I really much appreciate is that the upcoming NDP is now adopting a bottom-up approach. And of course, a questionnaire now is now being developed to capture, the key priorities, at the local level. So for me, I think this conversation has moved beyond an abstract alignment to a concrete action, a clearer action and a concrete action. I think it's clear now that Nigeria is no longer thinking either to pursue climate or economic growth, but we can see a strategic point of alignment between climate priorities and developmental priorities. So I think I will now hand over to our senior fellow from Africa Policy Research Institute. And I think I should also mention that this webinar is hosted by Africa Policy Research Institute and led by Alexander von Humboldt. I will hand over now to our senior fellow, Climate and Energy, Chibuike Agbayibo, for the official closing remark. Chibuike, you're welcome. Loud and clear.
David. It's been a very rich and insightful conversation, and also something that I've also been drawing a bit of lessons based on the work that APRI is doing in country around climate transitions. So my name is Chibuike Mabebu. I'm a senior fellow on climate and energy with APRI, and also coordinate our work on climate transitions in Nigeria. On behalf of APRI and the Alexander Boltz Foundation, I want to say thank you so much for taking out the time to join us for this insightful conversation. We hope that you also stay tuned through our newsletters to get communication around similar conversations that we'll be having, not just on climate, but also on other areas that the APRI covers. We are very open to taking any insights and feedback, communication from any one of you. And APRI remains committed to providing evidence-based research, knowledge, and outputs towards supporting climate transitions broadly, both in our work in Nigeria, West Africa, and globally as well. One more time, I want to really appreciate our speakers and panelists. Son Keleri, I appreciate you so much. Mr. Lewis, David, my colleague, and Charles. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Back to your meeting.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's have wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.